so beautiful. And what I really want to know is, what is good in your life today? I'm Kia, and this is the Female Veterans Podcast. And today I am here with someone who is incredibly special to me. We actually met 22 years ago when I was serving in the Navy in Great Lakes, and she has been a dear friend of mine ever since. If you will, it was kind of love at first sight as far as friendship goes. So if you wonder if I believe in love at first sight, I do, because it happened with my dear best friend, LiAnne. And let me tell you about her. She is one of the hardest working people I have ever known. As a soloprenuer whose career began in the pharmacy where we met, like I said, she's evolved and evolved. She evolved into program administration for allied health programs at Richland College in Texas. She was a professor, and she established her own consulting and instructional design sole proprietorship. She is extremely intelligent, savvy, and successful, but it wasn't always an easy road. So today, join me in welcoming LiAnne, and she's going to tell us all about her experience and give us some tips and tricks and strategies on how she made it through the transition. So with that, I'm going to say welcome, LiAnne.
Thank you so much. It's just such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you to share my story, a story that you play such an integral part of. So I'm so pleased, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. I have a question for you.
Okay.
I ask everyone this. What made you join the military in the first place?
Well, my father, several members of my family, in fact, had served in the military. My father was an Air Force officer. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was an Army officer. And, you know, in the corner of, kind of the back corner of my mind, I had considered the military, although I was sort of really on the university track, get my degree, start my career originally as an environmental biologist. And my path just sort of took a different turn. So I had come home from university. I was taking a year off. And I came across a recruiting office.
Imagine that.
Famous last words, right? You know, to be perfectly honest, I had no intention of enlisting at that time, but recruiters, it would seem, are really good at their jobs, right? Mm-hmm. So they said the right things. I took the ASVAB. They said, you know, you tested at the 99th percentile. You could pretty much do whatever you'd like to do within the confinements of what women were allowed to do at that time. And given that my mother had a nursing background, I'd always had sort of a, you know, an underlying interest in the health sciences, I decided to enter and pursue a career as a hospital corpsman. So that's kind of how that happened. I fell into it, but it was just really great. It was the right choice.
Okay. So what was boot camp like for you?
Boot camp. So here's the thing. Having come from a military-oriented family, squared corners, making your bed and standing in line as you're being given, we'll say, direction was a kind of a norm in my household, right? So aside from that, I was already a runner. So I ran in, you know, the thin Colorado air, and going to Florida for boot camp was kind of a relief in some ways, just because I love to run. We did a lot of running, and I could run like a gazelle in that Orlando air, right? Mm-hmm. So I also really enjoyed getting to be the person who would call out, you know, when we had to, like, the the marching beat. I can't even think of it. So as you're the person calling out or singing out the whatever, like if you got to the cadence, thank you. So if you could be the cadence caller and keep it up the whole time you were out there, gosh, that was like so awesome. It's so dumb, I guess, to think, but I really enjoyed that. Though the one thing that was hard, I guess, for me was getting up at 3 a.m. So having reveille at 3:30 in the morning, and they come in and bang the trash can lids and all of that was kind of a drag. But, because I was not a morning person at that time, I have evolved and I am now. But at that time, I think that was probably the hardest. Having somebody yell in my face, standing for hours, being subject to a regimented routine was something that I'd grown up with. And so it wasn't far from, some of my personal norms. If anything, I took comfort in it. I didn't buck it. I kind of fell right in. It was okay. It wasn't bad at all.
Did you make any friends while you were there? Like tight friendships?
No. In fact, mine was the last integrated company there in Orlando, company I-052, I remember. And, it was interesting as an integrated company, and me as, at that time, I was very much a tom girl, right? Tom girl, tomboy, whatever. Same. Anywho, I always had more male friends than I had female friends. So I kind of felt like, sort of one of the guys were not people that, I didn't develop really any friendships with any of them. The women in my company, some of them, they weren't used to the physical activity, the physical fitness, and they whined and cried, and it kind of irritated me. And I was like, you know what? Shut up. You're making this harder for us. Suck it up, buttercup, as we're having to make it rain in the room. You're sitting there crying. It's just going to make it last longer. So, I had no interest in carrying on any friendships, primarily because my mother was sending me these crazy care packages and letters, and a couple of my friends wrote me letters. So I kind of,
nice.
I've always been, as you know, a quality over quantity kind of person. I have a small, intimate group of friends. And I don't know, that just wasn't a priority to me at that time.
Right on. Okay, so after you got out of boot camp, you obviously went to A school, which was core school. Where did you go to school?
In San Diego.
Oh, how was that?
Oh my gosh. It was really incredible, actually. I enjoyed that experience. I think integrating into military life past boot camp, it was kind of interesting because, during boot camp, you're sort of being indoctrinated into this military system where you're thinking and you're being taught to be part of something that is greater than yourself. But it was branded a little differently when we were in A school. You still had responsibilities to the group, but then there was also this sort of individual achievement piece that you wanted to be a part of and to do well. And I really enjoyed core school. I enjoyed the content. I love maritime history.
Yeah, that was cool.
Oh my gosh. I loved that in boot camp. I loved everything about learning about Navy history. oh my gosh, I love it.
I agree with that.
I collect the books. I'm into it.
Yeah,
I love the Navy.
Yeah, I think that I always say everything has a history.
Yes.
And I'm such of a history nerd.
Me too.
That
completely.
The history of a hamburger, I'm into it. Any of that. So
truly.
Navy history was yay.
Ideology is just of anything is so fascinating to me.
Super cool.
Truly. And so I had a good experience being in another state. I traveled outside of the state, but it was for my church choir, right? So this was the first time that I was on my own. Aside from, when I had left to go to school and stuff, but it was such a good experience just being out there. And boy, you had to get your ass in gear, right? You had to be there on time, 7 a.m., do what you're supposed to do. There was a lot of pressure as you're developing these clinical skills. And then I wanted to pursue 8404 as a Marine Corpsman and do field med school. I was attached to Fleet Hospital 6, even though, that's about the time that people were starting to be pulled back at the tail end of Desert Storm. So I still have those desert camis. Never got to go, never got to do anything exciting. I would have been happy to have gone with my shipmates, but it, just kind of didn't pan out. I didn't end up getting to do that. And so serving, oh my gosh. Serving as a corpsman, once I started to staff there at the Naval Hospital it was such an incredible experience. I just remember I want to say this was before I went to pharmacy tech C school. I had the opportunity to take my ACLS certification. And that was like taking my skills and my training and the things that I was developing as a corpsman and just kicking it up a notch, doing ACLS. And then later on as a pharmacy technician, I literally attended every code in the hospital.
That's incredible.
So I'd grab that code bag and run down there. And it's one of those instances in which things are a little different in DOD land, right? So there were things, as a civilian technician, you have to wait for the pharmacist to arrive. And the pharmacist did, of course, arrive pretty quickly, but we were the first ones there, getting everything laid out, getting everything set up, and we were on it. And so having that much responsibility and having a direct impact on patient care just struck me, and I freaking loved it. I loved being part of the trauma cases and being there and assisting. I loved the first time I got to stitch someone. Oh my gosh, it was just incredible. It was an incredible experience. And not just that, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, but building relationships with patients, and you're there and it feels good the first time, a Marine or somebody calls you doc, you walk in the room, hey doc, you gonna help me out, you're gonna take care of me. And there's just this rapport. There's this rapport and this trust. And there's a gravity to it, but it's in the best way. I love that experience. And I think that's why, as a civilian technician later on, when people hear that you were a hospital corpsman and that you're a Navy tech, they're like, oh, okay. All right. I know what you are. You're shit hot. That's what you are. It's true. And I've had people tell me that because Navy pharmacy techs, we are shit hot. We know our stuff. It's amazing. So,
I mean, I'm not going to deny that.
Yes, ma'am.
But I didn't go to C school. I went OJT, and
incredible.
I learned better that way. I like to get up in there and get my hands dirty and learn on the go. And I feel like it really pushes me. And it took me about 6 months, but I think I became hot shit. The pharmacy was was my training ground, and I loved it when I was doing it.
Because we're a pharmacy, and I'm sure you just, you had to kind of prove yourself at first, and then you just jump in there and you do your thing. And seeing, and one experience, if I can get ahead of myself a little bit, after having completed my training as a pharm tech and staffing there at the Naval Hospital, there was a patient that I had assisted in taking care of. He was a senior chief. And so he'd had some type of procedure and he'd had a chest tube in. So I'd been able to assist. This was the first chest tube that I ever had the opportunity to remove. And so it was kind of like a traumatic experience, right? It was pretty crazy. And then, he continued to recover, and then he got discharged. And then later on, I saw him in the pharmacy and he was like, Smith. And I was like, Chief. And every time he came to the window, it was like I was a part of his healing. That was incredible. And I loved that. And both as a military technician and then later on as a civilian technician, when you see the way that you impact lives, that was just golly, so gratifying and part of what I enjoyed the most about the role in which I served.
Wow. So it sounds like to me that you were having a pretty incredible experience as a hospital corpsman and a pharmacy technician.
Oh.
Did you ever experience any like negative interactions while you were serving? Were you lucky and just kind of had a really cool experience?
You know,
because people do.
And that's the thing. I am one of those souls that when I enter into discussions like this, and I've had other panel discussions where I've been asked a question similar to that, after having heard a lot of really tough stories that a lot of other people have had.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I didn't have that many negative experiences. You know, as a woman,
mm-hmm.
we sort of grow accustomed
mm-hmm.
to men saying things that are inappropriate around us.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, you know, this was way, 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 way before any kind of Me Too. You just kind of roll your eyes and you're like, whatever, dude. And it was accepted as something that was greater than you that you couldn't do anything about. But I don't want to say that I was ever even really sexually harassed. You know, if anything, I was probably telling the dirty jokes. Who knows? Maybe I was harassing you. So I don't know. I guess I just didn't have those negative experiences. But at the same time, I think it was because I think it's just the way that I came across. I don't know. When you are a powerful person, when you work hard, people, I don't know. And I guess this isn't always the case. In my situation, I proved my worth to the people around me. I ran circles around a lot of people in terms of my work ethic because my father, as a small business owner, he's the hardest working person that I've ever known.
Mm-hmm.
And I got my work ethic from him. And so for me, I've had a job since I was 13 years old, you know, starting with the babysitting and after school programs and work. Everything who I am, I'm performance based.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I grew up. You proved your worth in my household by what you produced. And so it was an environment for someone like me. I was able to thrive in that environment, and I didn't have really too many negative experiences. It's like nothing really jumps out. I mean, gosh, even working there in the pharmacy, we always had a really good crew. I will say it was really lovely there in San Diego. I had the opportunity to, with really, really culturally diverse staff,
mm-hmm.
and, you know, being kind of sheltered from Denver, not super, super culturally diverse,
mm-hmm.
growing up in the 80s and 90s in Denver. So that was kind of a different thing. And I really enjoyed that. I got to experience the joy of Filipino food. And there is
a joy.
It is a joy. Oh.
I had a lot of that working in the pharmacy, and I loved it. I actually had this civilian tech. Her name was Gloria,
mm-hmm.
and she was amazing. She always cooked. We had a lot of potlucks in the pharmacy.
Yes.
And she was always making amazing, amazing food.
Oh.
I was very spoiled.
Yum.
And then we had another civilian pharmacist who, oh my gosh, why can't I think of her name right now? She was amazing. Nancy. I think her name was Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
She made cakes. And she would
was it the rice and coconut cakes?
No. That was Gloria. That was Filipino food. I think you're talking about.
Yeah.
I love that cake. That cake was, I mean, on another level.
So
but we're two foodies. She's truly a foodie. I'm a closet foodie. But so she made these like professional, like Wilton stuff, like birthday cakes. And my favorite was strawberry. And she would always make me this huge, it looked like a wedding cake, like strawberry cake, and it was amazing. So if she ever listens to this podcast, girl, you were the bomb. Okay. Your cakes were on point. And awesome. Gloria, you were amazing too. So,
but what's interesting is that, I knew that, given the subject matter of your podcast, and the bit that I know from listening to other women's experiences, I sort of reflected upon that in preparation for our visit. And I will say that I heard what other women were going through, even though I wasn't going through it myself. So, as a hospital corpsman, and then later on as a pharmacy technician, there weren't many billets on a ship. But, there's 1-2 people in most dispensaries. So it's kind of hard, to get those billets. And so I spent all of my time really at a naval hospital somewhere. I was, in San Diego, and then I did the temporary swap there in Great Lakes. I did a temporary swap at Millington, Tennessee, when that was still a naval hospital. It was more like a clinic, but it was technically a hospital. It was amazing. I loved that experience too. But, it's one of those things where I heard what other women sometimes would go through, and I would see sometimes other people being harassed, I guess.
Yeah.
Honestly, how I felt about myself, I was just like, nobody's going to harass me, right?
No, I mean,
I was, kind of a late bloomer, I guess you could say. So,
I mean, I think that it was kind of, and at least in my experience, technically there was tons of sexual harassment, right?
Yeah.
All around. Because you are in sort of this man's world. I mean, historically speaking, the military is a man's world. It is still very young, the way women are in the military and how their careers move in the military and what they're allowed to do.
Yeah.
And so it's still pretty young if you look at the history of military.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think that being in this man's world, there's certain things that have to happen. You actually have to work a little harder to prove yourself, which is, not equal, right? We're aware of that. But going into the military, you realize very quickly that there are going to be things that you need to accept in order to sort of thrive.
Absolutely.
And you do it sort of unconsciously to where you're like, yes, I'm cool with these dirty jokes. Yes, I'm cool with these behaviors, as long as they're not crossing a certain threshold.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yes, I'm cool. So you get really chill about a lot of stuff and very open-minded about a lot of kinds of humor that some other women, maybe not in that experience, would not be cool with. So that's kind of my perspective on it. I just was really, really laid back. And like you, I had a lot of male friends. And so I was lucky in certain aspects of my experience to where I was protected by males that I could trust. Yeah. And there are many women, though, that are in situations like one of my guests, LiAnne, that came on a previous episode. She was in a all-male battalion. Those guys should have had her back. Instead, they didn't. So that is really an unfortunate situation that she experienced in the Army. And that happens often. I've had another guest, Angie, who was just on. And in her situation, she was on a base where she was one of 4 women, I think it was.
Wow.
And just everything that she went through was horrific. And so having had these conversations with these women, my military experience was amazing until the day that it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I feel but I still feel kind of lucky because there are so many worse things that can happen when you're serving. So, but not every story is a bad one. And so it's really important for me to bring people like you on the show so that people, maybe a girl is thinking of going into the military. They should know what they're going into, good or bad. This is the potential outcome of the situation.
Absolutely. And, it's important to be part to get to feel as though you're part of something that is greater than yourself. With, I feel now as the mother of 2 teenagers and a preteen, this generation can tend to be sort of self-consumed to some extent, and being part of something where you're thinking of the collective good over individual good is, gosh, it's so important. And I think that every young person, if we were like some other countries where there was some kind of obligated service, I think it would be a really good thing. And so, I don't know. Even though there are aspects of it that, I think that bad things can happen and whatnot, I still think that by and large, I had a really positive experience. And if there was a young woman who wanted to consider the military, that I think it's a very viable option. It teaches you discipline. It teaches you, especially in my vocation as a hospital corpsman, compassion. You have the potential opportunity, certainly in a combat situation. What's important to note is while there can be, as you have detailed, a lot of difficulties and challenges sometimes with military life and the things that we have learned to accept as women, I will also say that it is so important and valuable to be a part of something that is greater than yourself. And I'm a firm believer that, if there was some type of obligated service here in the United States to help young people, maybe spend like 2 years, 4 years in the military, oh my gosh, there's so much to be gained from just the discipline and having a routine, touching another person's life, being part of a collective effort. You build, oh my gosh, you build leadership skills, you build collaborative skills, you learn how to communicate effectively. If you're paying attention and you learn from your environment, you do learn to communicate and interact with people. If you're traveling around the world, you have the ability, if you're paying attention and you're choosing to grow, to gain intercultural competence, find out about other cultures, find things to appreciate about the differences that exist across cultures. My gosh, that's part of why I think what was just the beauty that shaded that experience is that I got to work with people from every walk of life as well. And so, golly, I just gained so much, and it is a part of who I am as a person as a result. So yeah, by and large, I think it was a wonderful experience that I think probably isn't for everyone.
Right.
But for someone with my background, it actually was a pretty wonderful experience overall.
Right on. Well, I definitely loved the times that I got to spend with you in the military.
Likewise.
So definitely how we met was when she came to do a swap. Like, we needed some help in the pharmacy. We had a recruit surge, which means in the summertime, lots of new recruits. And in the pharmacy, everyone's getting sick because everyone's coming from everywhere. And everyone gets sick. So in the pharmacy, you get an influx of patients that need medications. And so in the military, as I always say, pharmacy, when you work in the pharmacy, everyone's like a pharmacist. I mean, they have technicians, and that's the technical term, but we were doing the same job as the pharmacists. And that was when we were very young. It was a lot of responsibility, but it was very, very gratifying work. And absolutely. I loved to interact with people. I absolutely loved my job in the pharmacy. I didn't so much like to be called doc. I don't want to touch people. It wasn't for me. I didn't have that wonderful, like, flowery experience treating patients. It wasn't for me. I had a run at it. No,
Not
thank
your
you.
cup of tea.
But working in the pharmacy, memorizing the medications, what they were for, helping people understand how that they would affect their bodies was like life for me at that time as a young woman. And I absolutely wouldn't trade that experience for anything in the world. It was amazing. And so how we ended up meeting was that she turned up one day to help us out with this recruit surge in the summertime. I mean, thousands of people, like lines all around the hospital coming in for medications. And we were just inundated. So she came to help. And I will tell you, the minute I saw her, I was like, this girl and I are going to be the best of friends. And that is exactly what happened. And so now, some 22 years later, we're still having a blast. So, we've spent a lot of our lives at a distance, but very closely connected anyway. And so I've had the privilege of watching many transitions in your life. Yes. So I am going to ask this question anyway. What was transitioning out of the military like for you?
Yeah. So that's where the story gets a little interesting, because when I transitioned out, I think because I was used to those norms, I was used to the routines and the things that we were allowed to do in the pharmacy as military techs. Man, I got out and it was a different story. Yeah. Completely. As a civilian. You know, I moved out here. I moved out to Texas with the guy I was dating, later married, and I couldn't find a hospital pharmacy job right away. Interestingly, just, you know, even when I would moonlight, because of course, when you don't have any kids and you're single, of course you have 3 jobs, right? So I would work, especially in my last duty station, I worked on base and I did the 410s or whatever there. And then I worked 10-hour shifts on the weekends. And then I got like a 3rd job because, you know, shoe money, right? So shoe money. And so, you know, as a civilian, these were all in hospital pharmacy settings is kind of the point that I was making. And so it never really even occurred to me to work in a retail pharmacy. In fact, the closest thing that I'd ever worked, the closest thing to a retail pharmacy was when I worked at 32nd Street. So 32nd Street was a branch pharmacy. I was there in San Diego. Can I tell one of my 32nd Street stories?
Go right ahead.
Oh my gosh. So this was just it's the funniest thing. So I was working there in the pharmacy, right? And so it was kind of set up like an outpatient pharmacy. It was an outpatient pharmacy, in fact. And so, but it was, you know, serviced active duty service members, their dependents and retirees. So during the, you know, the middle part of the day, of course, it got really super busy. We had a line out of the door. So there were all these people in line, including this sweet little old lady. She becomes relevant later. So this young woman comes trouncing into the door, right? Marches right to the front of the line. Everybody's looking at her like, what are you doing? And so, you know, she turns and she says, oh, my husband's a lieutenant. So,
wow. Entitled much?
Entitlement. Exactly. Wow. And well, this little lady, this sweet little gal who had been in the line, she turned and she said, well, my husband is Rear Admiral such and so, who's the commander of such and so Pacific Fleet. So I think you better take your ass back in line. Oh, no. So she turns 7 shades of red.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
And took it to the back of the line. And I loved seeing her get put in her place. That was so great. Oh, it was so great. And she just said, oh, and that, you know, seasoned military wife was like, whatever, you know.
It's funny.
It was so great. So, but that was the closest thing that I'd ever had to working outpatient pharmacy. And so it never even occurred to me, aside from the fact that I was coming from California to Texas, so cost of living was different and the pay was very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of was holding out, for a hospital pharmacy job. So, as time went on, I did, I think the very first job that I worked here there, I guess I shouldn't say here, but there in Texas was working for a pharmacy software company, completely outside of anything that I'd ever done, and I think the most prevailing thing that I felt was lost.
Mm-hmm.
I felt lost.
I hear that a lot.
The military and the culture and those around me and the routine, it had become part of who I was as a person. That was my family.
Yeah.
And civilians didn't understand.
No.
They didn't understand. And yeah, people laugh and say that maybe, that we don't have any military bearing. Well, we have a hell of a lot more than civilians do. And so being out.
We just like that fun in the Navy.
Exactly. And so, being outside of that, it was really hard. I wanted my family back, You feel separation anxiety to some extent. And then once I did eventually get a job in a hospital pharmacy, the one thing that always struck me was how they told us everything we couldn't do.
Yeah.
Oh, you're just a technician.
Yeah, that's what stopped me. I was not going to go to school to become a pharmacist, to do a job that I've been doing for the last 3 years. I knew inside and out. It seemed like a waste of money.
And that's the thing. And becoming a pharmacist was just it wasn't my dream. I could have followed that clinical pathway, but I don't know. It just wasn't something that I wanted to do. I was happy enough, I guess, as a pharmacy technician. Besides, again, I think I said the wrong thing early on. I said environmental biology, and I really meant environmental geology. So I was kind of far off of my original career path, but I really enjoyed working in the pharmacy. I really enjoyed the work that I did. And not just that, for my last duty station, I got a chance to act as our safety training person within the department. And that's where I kind of started to dip a toe into education and training.
Oh, that's where that began.
Right on. And then when I was stationed in San Diego, I became an American Red Cross AIDS and HIV instructor as well. Of course, this was in the early to mid 90s, and at the height
things were different
of the HIV epidemic. And being a part of educating people about the myths that were associated with HIV infection was extremely important, and I loved being part of that early on to demystify how a person could and could not contract AIDS.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Actually, it just reminded me that I think, here's a little known fact, and you probably don't even know this about me.
Okay. Tell me.
When I was in private school in the 80s, I was part of a PSA video about HIV and AIDS.
Really?
And it was a bunch of school kids, and we would ask questions about the disease. And so there was someone teaching us kids about HIV and AIDS. And I think I must have been in maybe 4th or 5th grade at the time.
That's kind of cool.
But it was a thing. And, I got to learn a lot about it really early. Yeah. So I always had a very open-minded perspective and understanding about what it really was.
So did I. And it did. It framed my life experience. I lost friends.
Likewise.
And that, just hangs as those are all tears in my soul. Always.
Amazing, though, that they have medications now.
It's incredible, isn't it?
That can, bring the active infection levels down
to where they don't experience all that same degree of immunosuppression and can actually live healthy lives
and long, healthy lives. It's just, it's amazing what science can do. Really.
It is amazing, because I remember in all of those early videos how, there was one particular video, of course we presented it as part of the workshop that we did. It was a 4-hour workshop, and this, man talking about his experiences as, it was quite often these secondary and tertiary infections that ultimately would claim people's lives. And he said, I don't want to die. I want to live. I want to experience my family. And by the time the video, of course, they're giving all these testimonials, and, he did ultimately pass away. And it's so seeing how that whole, immunotherapy, how that, it just advancements in viral therapy is just is really, really incredible. And so I'm very happy. That's kind of exciting. That's like a little linkage that we have.
Yeah.
But that's really where I got a sense of, wow, I really love being part of the education and training process. And so, as a civilian, I feel like I had to find ways to redefine myself. I think as a person, I've had these cycles throughout my life of needing to sort of reinvent myself, if whether or not it was through no fault of my own, because of, stupid choices that I made, and I had to sort of hit the reset button and move in a different direction, or because of forces that were outside of my control. I needed more. Weaknesses are weaknesses. You can try to shore up a weakness. It's, there's a series of books that, first break all the rules and now find your strengths. And I'm a big strengths finder kind of person. Identifying early on what your strengths are, I think is extremely important. And so I think that was a big part of my evolution as well in my career. Interestingly enough, we read that book, Now Find Your Strengths, as a leadership team while I was working there at Baylor. And I took the typology assessment and I learned what my core strengths were. And I took that information to heart. And I determined that I was going to do some things to be very intentional about how I was going to develop. So out of all of my experiences, you know what? I just took what I learned and I just sort of added it to my repertoire and found other ways to develop these strengths in myself. And then when the next opportunity came along where I identified a need that I would be able to fill, then I was equipped to then move into that next role. And I feel that's sort of how my career, has gone. When I first decided to move on to the college, I sat down with my director of pharmacy at that time and I said, Mike, I really want to do this, but man, I love my job. And he said, this would be a really incredible thing that would stretch you, LiAnne, and you would be a fool not to take this position. We'll miss you and blah, 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 but go and do that thing. And I was always so thankful that, for his support, and just really, my gosh, he was such an advocate always. And, and he, of course, continues to be just a force in pharmacy, not just in Texas, but nationwide, just an incredible man. And so having these incredible people who, supported me and advocated for me just continued to propel me forward, aside from the fact that I was also working really super hard as well. And so, after a period of time, I found that the curriculum development piece was, that was something that I really enjoyed. And after I finished my undergrad and started my graduate program, but the routine there at the college, it was as such that, I was there during the recession, and the college had to do some belt tightening like a lot of other employers during that period. Right. We lost a ton of people. And so we were subject to all of these reorgs. And reorg is a fancy way of saying do more with less, smile and be happy about it. And so every person ends up having this huge stack of hats. And I was
or as I like to call it, overworked and underpaid.
Yes. Overworked and underpaid. And I started to get crispy burnt. And I needed to do something different. And I had identified early on, one of the things that I got a chance to do through my affiliation with the college was to serve as an accreditation surveyor with an accrediting body, the American Society of Health System Pharmacists, which accredits pharmacy technician training programs nationwide. And so I served as a guest surveyor on traveling around for programs who wish to seek their initial or to affirm an existing accreditation. And as I was working with these program directors across the country, I found so many people who had the same story that I did. You have this dream and this idea of how you would wish for your program to be if you had the time.
Mm-hmm.
But so many of them, they were teaching and they were involved in the entire coordination of their students and setting up externships and doing all of the paperwork. And then, of course, you're subject to reporting completion data and all this stuff for the college or for the university, depending upon your employer.
Right.
And it's just so much. And I thought, man, in 1 year's time, here's what I want to do. I want to transition out as an education consultant while I'm working on my master's study and kind of see where it takes me, because I just, again, kind of like in the early days, I needed more.
Right.
I needed something different, and I saw a sustainable need that I would be able to fulfill to another way to give back to the profession that I loved
Mm-hmm.
in a meaningful way, but to help other people who are going through the same things that I did, who want quality programs. But sometimes it takes a village, and having another person there to partner with whom you could collaborate to enact some things and to refresh your curriculum, your coursework, and things of that nature. I wanted to be able to help
Mm-hmm.
and make a difference. And so that's kind of the direction that my career went. So I left the college in 2016 and began my career independently. First, as an education consultant, I did a few different types of projects. And as I continued to grow kind of as a formalized instructional designer, then that's when I had the opportunity to build a couple of new programs, and I've gotten a chance to do a few different types of design projects. The clients that I work with now, I assisted in writing another technical manual, kind of like a textbook for a curriculum, and am working with another client in the new program development and writing the coursework, along with a team of IDs. And it is incredible. And I'm,
Mm-hmm.
helping to lead this team of IDs in my role for this particular contract. And I tell you what, I work some crazy hours.
You do. You work all the time, which I respect that. But I will say, if I can go back just a little bit, because this all sounds really incredible, right? And I've watched it happen, and it's been an incredible journey. But make no mistake, I want to just make it really, really clear that this woman worked her butt off to get here.
Yeah.
Like, there were very difficult times. Everything was not rosy all the time.
Yeah, I was writing that book as I was going through a divorce.
Right. There were like, there were like serious hardships that occurred there. So, sure. I mean, it does sound amazing, but I do want to make it clear that it was not an easy transition. It didn't just go from being in the military and having this military career to this amazing, entrepreneurial status and like creating amazing work for her clients. There were struggles there. She worked her butt off. And I think one of the things that I really want to emphasize about that is that one of the things she said was that she used the skills that she learned in the military, and she also redefined herself repeatedly. So if I was going to offer a strategy from what I've heard that she said for anyone coming behind her and trying to figure out, okay, I'm out of the military now, what am I going to do? Look at the strengths that you did acquire while serving. There are very many skills that we all learn regardless of what we experience.
Absolutely.
Those skills are strengths regardless. Take those skills and redefine yourself, and then start moving in the direction of what you want. It's a mindset, and you can get what you want. It's about your choices. There weren't always good choices. Like she said, sometimes she made bad choices, but she always bounced back by redefining herself and recognizing the bad choice she made, changing her mindset about it, and then moving towards the goal. So, and that is exactly how I watched her get to where she is right now. Yeah. A very, very successful woman running her own business, commanding top dollar, and anyone out there can do it because I was with her when she was struggling. I was right there. I saw it happen, and I watched this woman bust her butt to get to where she is right now. And I know that if she can do it, anyone can do it.
Absolutely.
So anyone out there that's struggling right now, that's not understanding or thinking or being able to figure out what their next move is going to be, start thinking about what your strengths are. Start there, and then thinking about where you want to go, and then make that plan and just work at it.
Absolutely. But recognize that you don't have to do it alone, because, if I can put a plug in there for community colleges, here's the thing. There's a community college, in every community. And a lot of people, particularly, I want to say when we were in the military, there weren't a lot of people, especially on the enlisted side, who had family members who were degreed. Mm-hmm. And so many people that I was in and around would have been first generation college students. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people maybe, you get out of the military, and the idea of going back to school, when you do feel lost, as I did.
I was lost too.
You don't know what options you have. Mm-hmm.
It took time.
And a lot of people, it takes a bit, to learn. Not everyone has the opportunity to assess their strengths. Mm-hmm. Do a web search and find those typology assessments. You don't have to read the book, although it is a great read and I do recommend it. There are typology assessments that help. There are tools that help you to identify, what are my vocational strengths? What are my core skills? Because you know what? You will find that those core talents and skills could be applied to a variety of different vocations. In fact, when you take the StrengthsFinder assessment, it will generate sort of a results report, and also gives you examples. It's like a 4-character code that is like, you're like, I am an INTJ, right? And so when I look at what kinds of vocations are great for INTJs, it gives you a starting point for, looking at, okay, what's my next move? What I want to do? And go to your local community college campuses. Quite often they're less intimidating. The tuition's a whole lot lower. But you know what I found, such as was most definitely the case at Richland College, was there are some incredible faculty who are there in the community college setting because they like the smaller class sizes. Mm-hmm.
And it just takes the time to figure it out. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to stay stuck. You don't have to stay lost. There's ways to move forward.
There are ways to move forward. And I think it will surprise you how there is some pearl from your experience in the military that there is no civilian equivalent for your shit hotness. Oh, no. And there will be something. I love that
you call it shit hotness, though.
There's no civilian equivalent for whatever it was that you did as a military person. And
what and how you learned. Because for me, that's how I learned.
Absolutely.
It's that accelerated learning that was incomparable in the civilian world, how quickly I could learn a new skill.
Most definitely. And those are those intangible assets that we gained from being part of the military. So don't sell yourself short on those things, the ability to think on your feet, the ability also just to flat fall in and do what you need to do.
And to suck some shit up.
Keep for real. Truly. I mean, we collaborate better. We're better team members because we were part
better leaders.
Absolutely. We're better leaders.
Enlisted or officer.
Absolutely.
Just to be able to lead people is just an invaluable skill.
Most definitely. So look within, but also look without, and know you'll have those resources there on that college campus as well. And I think that you'll find that you're not alone, that there are a lot of other people who are in the same position. And my gosh, that's a place where you can find family. That's a place where you can find a springboard for redefining yourself in a whole new way. So if you're feeling alone and you're feeling lost, look at some tools for assessing all the good stuff that you gained from your military experience, and then find some ways to mobilize.
Right.
All that good stuff.
And okay, and so then there are people out there that might be struggling with like depression and anxiety and PTSD, and admittedly it's going to be a little bit harder for you.
Sure.
So before you do all that, seek some support.
Yes. It's all about support.
Get support, whether it's from therapist or a peer support. Reach out to another veteran, but the point is to reach out and talk to somebody that can help you get on the path. And then once you're getting your illness and your discomfort and your emotions in order, then the next step is to look at all of these things, look at what vocations you would be best at, and to figure out how to redefine yourself. Because sometimes we come out of the military and we don't want to even think about the military. Sometimes we want to demilitarize ourselves and we go running in the other direction as far as we can, because that's what I did.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm one of those people who did that. I was like, no military anything for a good minute, and I don't want to think about it or talk about it, and don't talk to me about it. Like I went really far in the opposite direction, and that's okay too.
Absolutely.
But once you're ready to start moving forward, these are tools that can really, really help you. It's good to sometimes know, even if you're not going to use it right away.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean? It's good to have that in your toolbox, though, for a later date.
Yep.
So, again, I advocate for always finding someone to talk to, getting peer support or mental health support if you're comfortable with that. But just having someone to talk to start you in the direction of healing, because a lot of us have experienced trauma, and you can't move forward down a successful path when you have unresolved trauma.
Absolutely.
So my first piece of advice to go along with this is to start talking to someone and start working through that when you're ready. And then once you're through that, and once you're doing that and you're ready to take the next steps towards your goals or your dreams, then listen to this advice again.
Most definitely, and recognize that gaining support and seeking help is strength. It is not weakness. So often.
And you're not a victim, you're a survivor.
Exactly. You're not a victim,
time.
You are a survivor. And seeking those supports, whether, in the profession of pharmacy, we say there's nothing wrong with gaining better health through chemistry. You do what you got to do to cope and to get healthy and to feel healthy. And, I think, gosh, as a society, of course, we need to continue to destigmatize behavioral health challenges.
Absolutely.
Because millions of people in the U.S. population are challenged with some type of behavioral health issue. So don't let any convention make you feel shamed or make you feel as though that is weakness. It is strength to reach out for the resources that are around you and take advantage of them. Absolutely. And get to a healthier point where you can be your best self. And then you can dig deep and look and see what are the things that you did gain. If there are some positive things, good things that you gained out of your military experience that you could then apply and to create a better life for yourself and for your family on down the line.
Normally, this is the part where I say, what tips, tricks, and strategies do you have that you can pass on. But I think that we just discussed those.
Yeah, I think so too. Yay.
So I guess with that, I need to start wrapping this up. And I just want to say, you know how much I love you.
I love you.
And I think you are just the most amazing person ever.
You are.
And I want to thank you for taking the time out to come out here and do this interview with me live in my little mini studio and hang out and just have the best time and talk about your experiences. And it's so important to share the good ones as well as the bad ones. And I'm so happy that yours was a good one, you know, and it's such a blessing. I think all of us that have not had direct trauma are so lucky, I'm finding.
Yeah.
And so to just to feel that and to realize what a blessing that is. And
absolutely. I don't take that for granted. That's for sure. Because, you know, and I guess I don't. I'm the type of person that I've found, I think just because I'm, you know, because of my faith, I see the purpose in whatever struggles that I've had, and every struggle, every challenge was preparing me for whatever was going to be that next leg of the journey. And so, you know, I hope that I didn't paint a rosy picture, because it hasn't always necessarily been easy. And, you know, you struggle with loneliness, and you struggle with feeling lost, and you struggle with thinking, God, or shit, did I do the right thing? And am I headed in the right direction? And, you know, what are going to be the implications, especially once you have a family, once I had children, you know, I had to think, I couldn't just think about what I wanted to do. I had to think of what was going to be best for my children. And then later on, for a period as a single parent, after a divorce, then you have to reinvent yourself all over again.
Yeah, so reinvention is seeming like it's the key. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. I appreciate you. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you next time.